As Wes walked toward the main lobby of the radio station, a beam of light made its way through the cracks and glistened on the infamous rogue's gallery of photos. Wes had passed by these pictures often, without noticing them, but today the light accented them strangely. It must be the angle of the sun this time of year, he thought, scanning the pictorial account of WTTK's influence on Columbus County. Looking at the photographs, Wes sensed something he hadn't noticed before. He stepped closer, and with his fingertips brushed aside the dust that had collected on the glass of one of the photographs. Impossible, he thought. He leaned closer, eyes inches from the photo. Hancock, Cruz, the coroner, and several other city officials had something in common. They were all wearing cufflinks with a triangular symbol. Suddenly, the exhilaration Wes had felt moments ago was exhausted. The order, Wes thought. They all belong, every one of them, including Cruz. Now he knew why Cruz had been so disturbed about Hancock's treatment. Like a hangman's noose tightening around his neck, Wes felt his nightmare choking him. That weekend and all the next week were filled with a tension Wes had never experienced. Every night at 8 p.m., Annette walked to a payphone at the corner of Calhoun Street to call. Jennifer started seeing Dr. Olinger to treat her venereal disease, Annette said. Although each visit is traumatic, Jennifer has coped well. Even her fear of doctors has begun to fade away. She knows that they may be trying to make the pains in her stomach go away. Well, Wes interrupted, that sounds like the best news I've heard in some time. Good for Jennifer. Wes smiled from ear to ear, and even though he couldn't see Annette, he knew she was smiling too. I guess I've worried about you for nothing, Wes chuckled. Oh, Wes, I just wish you could have been there. Dr. Olinger is the kindest man I've ever known. Well, almost the kindest. Later, from the warm fog of slumber, Wes was suddenly jolted awake by the commanding bell of his wall phone. It was Annette again, pushing their lives forward dramatically by a single call. Wes, I know it's late, almost 2 a.m., and we just spoke a few hours ago, but I had to talk to you again tonight, Annette said. I left Jennifer in the apartment and slipped out to call you. We had a long talk after I hung up with you earlier, and you need to know what she told me. Wes muttered a sleepy greeting and a warning about Annette being out on the street that late at night and leaving Jennifer alone in the apartment. Annette protested. This is just too important to wait. When I was tucking Jennifer into bed tonight, I finally asked her what she meant by husband. I was right about one thing. My husband, Gregory, was her husband. Wes said nothing. The tone of Annette's voice and the rapid pace of her speech convinced him that he shouldn't interfere with the flow of her conversation. Wes, I don't understand. Bad people are bad people. Evil is evil. But this is unspeakable, unimaginable. I can't take it any more, Wes. This has to end, and I've got to end it. I've made up my mind tonight to come back to Clarion and go public with my story. I want you to come get me, and we've got to keep Jennifer hidden until I can find someone, some sane, decent person, someone who will believe me and stop the order before anyone else suffers like this. You're serious, Annette, Wes said. Maybe this is just a reaction to what you've heard. Sleep on it. Maybe you'll change your mind in the morning. I told you, I'm going public with my story. Any idea who could look after Jennifer? It would have to be somebody you know and trust. Annette knew someone. I'll speak with Nurse Milthorpe tomorrow. You get back to the apartment before she wakes up and is frightened because you're not there. I don't fully understand your decision, but I'll support you 100%. Wes sat back down in his lounge chair to call Manly Harris. The phone rang so many times Wes wondered if Harris had left town. Finally, he answered in a surly voice that made Wes wince. Manly Harris, it's Wes Bryant. I know it's late, but this is an emergency. The urgent tone in Wes's voice jolted Harris awake. Wes, I've been thinking a lot about you. Do you know anything about custody cases? Wes interrupted. I've dealt with a few. Suppose one of the parents disagrees with a custodial decree and kidnaps the child. You know, goes into hiding and violates a court order. Would you handle a case like that? That depends on the reason. Child abuse. I'd take a case like that. Manley, I need you to take a case right now. Annette Simpson and her daughter Jennifer. I haven't got time to go into detail now. I'll get in touch with you late tomorrow afternoon. Annette wants to go public with her story. Manley, Hancock killed Carmichael, and he didn't do it with a car. Look, Bryant, if there's any chance that we can bring to justice the people who killed Carmichael, I'd stake my life, my law practice, and everything I've got on it. I'll stay at my office tomorrow until you call. Wes put down the phone, scarcely believing what he had done. Wes stood up from the chair and stretched his arms over his head, pondering his plans. He thought of all the people whose help he'd need to implement a life-saving scenario for Jennifer. If any one of these people let him down, Annette's plan to expose the Order of the Dark Raven would fail. Hours later, Wes was driving back to Annette and Jennifer. When Jennifer saw Wes, she opened the door and threw her arms around his waist as far as they would go, hugging him tightly and crying out over and over again, Mr. Wes, you came back!" Wes knelt and enfolded her in a smothering hug. Annette appeared behind Jennifer and also threw her arms around Wes and hugged him tightly. "Guess who else is here?" Annette said, pointing behind her toward the tiny living room. Wes looked to see Michelle Milthorpe watching the whole scene. "I called and asked if she would come over. I also told her what I'm going to do, and she's agreed to help in any way she can." "That's great," Wes said. Michelle Milthorpe poured a glass of milk for Jennifer and prepared coffee for the others. Then she took Jennifer by the hand, leading her to the bedroom so Annette and Wes could talk. For the next hour they talked about Annette's decision and what it would mean to each of them. Finally it was time to go. The two women shared a final assuring glance. Then Annette went to Jennifer and kissed her goodbye one last time. "I won't be away long, baby. Listen to Nurse Milthorpe." "I will, Mommy." Wes smiled at them and opened the front door. A tear slipped down Annette's cheek as she put on her coat and followed Wes out of the apartment. Minutes later they were driving through the outskirts of Chicago, headed toward the Indiana state line. Annette leaned over and tenderly kissed Wes on the cheek. As she slumped down in her seat and leaned her head back against the headrest, she said, "You're a very special man, Wes Bryant. What went wrong between you and your ex-wife, Polly, is really none of my business. Maybe you were both at fault. I don't know. But I have the feeling you've grown a lot since then. I can tell you this much. I like the man I know. I like him a lot." As she said those words, a beautiful smile crossed her lips. "We are doing the right thing," Wes thought to himself. As the outskirts of Clarion slowly came into view, Wes nudged Annette's arm. At first her limp body moved without any sign of waking. "Next stop, Clarion, Indiana," he said in his best imitation of a train conductor. "Wes," Annette said, "I'm not sure what to do next. I've made this decision to come back, but where do I start?" "First, we're going to call Manley Harris. He's waiting to hear from us," Wes said as he eased his car down the off-ramp of the freeway at the Clarion exit. Wes pulled alongside the west end of the station near the restroom entrance where a payphone hung from the wall. He searched through his pockets for a quarter. "Manley, it's Bryant," Wes said. "Wes," Harris exclaimed, "boy, am I glad to hear from you. I never got back to sleep last night trying to figure out this situation. It's not going to be as easy as I thought, Wes. Is Annette with you?" "Yeah," Wes said. "Where can we meet?" "Not at my office," Harris said. "How about Hannah Carmichael's? We'll be safe there." 10 minutes later, Wes arrived at the Carmichael house, familiar surroundings that held for him a mixture of hope, fond memories, and deep pain. It only took one firm knock on the door for Hannah Carmichael to answer. She flung open the screen door and engulfed Wes and Annette in her big, strong arms. As she did, she broke into convulsive sobs. Several times she tried to collect herself and say something, but she couldn't. She stood at the threshold of her door weeping. Hannah reached out both of her hands, took one of Wes's and Annette's hands, and stepping backward, led them through the door. Manley Harris rose from the couch to greet them, shaking Wes's hand vigorously. As Hannah and Annette began chatting, Harris motioned for Wes to follow him through the living room into the kitchen. It was unusually warm for mid-November and comfortable enough to sit outside in the sunshine. Harris looked at Wes soberly. "I wish I had good news for you, but I don't." "Aren't you going to take the case?" "It's not that. This isn't a simple issue. A custodial hearing won't help you." Wes leaned forward, curious to hear what Harris was talking about. "I sat down this morning and thought this whole thing through from every angle," Manley said. "If Annette wants to go before a judge and get a reversal of the custodial decree, that wouldn't be a criminal proceeding, so it wouldn't be public. It's a closed hearing. She'd have no chance to tell her story beyond the courtroom. You couldn't be there. Annette would be all by herself with Jennifer and the grandparents. I don't think you want to subject her to that." "There is one other angle," Manley went on. "If Annette pleaded guilty to kidnapping her daughter, she might be indicted. But that would only be for contempt of court, not a criminal violation, since there's no missing person report. The Simpson grandparents never filed one because they didn't want the whole state knowing Jennifer was missing. Without filing some type of charge, you can't get this thing before a judge." "You mean Annette can't just walk into a police station or into a judge's office and say that she's kidnapped her daughter and violated a custody decree?" "That's not the way the legal system works. Anyway, if she went to the police and said she kidnapped her own child, they'd immediately want to know where she found Jennifer. You can be sure that if the police checked with the Simpsons, they wouldn't want the authorities nosing around. And what would you tell the police in another county about not going to Hancock?" Wes hung his head and shook it from side to side, stretched out his hands on the side of his chair, gripping the armrest tightly in frustration. Harris continued. "Wes, I know this isn't what you wanted to hear, but I'm a lawyer." Harris stood to his feet, walked about 10 feet away, and leaned his right shoulder against the deep ridges of the bark on the cottonwood tree. "I want to bring the Order of the Dark Raven to justice as much as you do," said Harris. "I want to get them for killing Reverend Carmichael. I want those people put behind bars so they don't keep tormenting children like Jennifer, but I've exhausted every legal angle I know." Harris pushed himself away from the tree and paced back and forth, as if hoping for a miracle solution to pop into his mind. Wes sat in silence, his body, mind, and emotions exhausted. What could Wes do now? The order held a loaded gun to his head. How could he keep them from pulling the trigger? "But there must be a way," Annette insisted. "Manley Harris is a good lawyer, but he can't think of everything. I won't give up that easily. I can't." Wes smiled to encourage Annette, but inside he floundered. "I'm so tired," he said. "I can't think straight right now. I need sleep. I'll come back for you later." Something jolted him from deep sleep. Wes bolted upright, thinking it was early morning, and he could sleep another couple of hours. Then he noticed the sunlight and realized he had overslept. Bleary-eyed, he peered at the alarm clock. 7:30, nearly an hour beyond the time he'd set the alarm. Wes grabbed the clock and shook it, punishing the old timepiece for its errant ways. He glanced at a corner of the room where he had tossed soiled shirts for the laundry and angrily threw the clock into the pile. Quickly, Wes showered, dressed, and headed for the radio station. After the run-in with Warren Cruz over the Hancock-Harris confrontation, he didn't need more strikes against him. When he got to the WTTK studios, Wes slipped through the back door. Briefcase and laundry bag in hand, he carefully edged his way down the hallway, past some large outdoor public address system speaker cabinets that had been stored in the hallway for some time. He hurried into his office, hoping no one had noticed his late arrival. But someone had. The last person he needed to deal with, Warren Cruz. Wes had barely stepped inside his office and hung his suit jacket on a hook when Cruz pushed open the door, stuck in his head, and said, "Been waiting for you to get in. You and I have to talk about some things. How about right now?" The tension in Cruz's voice indicated it wouldn't be a casual conversation about program topics and advertising quotas. Wes knew he had no choice. "What's on your mind?" Wes walked behind his desk and sat down in his chair. Cruz took one of the two molded plastic chairs sitting in a corner and placed it near the desk. He leaned forward, drawing himself close to Wes. "I'm not happy with the job you've been doing lately." Before he could continue, Wes interrupted. "What's the problem? Our spot sales are up double from this time last year. I've done every advertiser endorsement you've requested. If that's not good enough, what is?" Cruz dropped his eyes and rolled the fingers of his right hand rhythmically across the desk. Little finger, then the third, middle, and index finger, and back again. "Why were you absent from the microphone?" "Hey, I haven't had a serious vacation in 3 years. That Hancock and Harris interview didn't help matters any. Hancock deserved to be nailed." "That's your opinion, Wes, but not the opinion of most people in this town. I'm still getting complaints about how you embarrassed Sheriff Hancock." Cruz's eyes narrowed and flashed with anger. "Don't ever do that again." Wes had to make a split-second decision. He could either back off and wait for a better opportunity to deal with this issue, or take it head-on. "What's the problem, Warren? Are they leaning on you?" Cruz cocked his head and looked at Wes out of the corner of his eye. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do, Warren. Do they have something on you? You're one of them, aren't you?" Cruz pushed his chair back, scraping the metal caps on the legs against the bare wood floor. He looked at Wes, his face white. "You're pushing too hard," he said. "You know what happened to Carmichael. You know, Wes, I don't want that to happen to you. Or me." Cruz slowly undid his tie, took his jacket off, and draped it over the back of his chair. He had unbuttoned his shirt. On his chest were tattooed 3 interlocking triangles. "There's only one reason I showed you this, Wes, and it's for your own good. 5 years ago I was destitute and needed money. Someone told me where I could get it. I didn't know what I was getting into. It was just a loan on the side. Then I missed a couple of payments. They roughed me up a little. Finally, I signed over the station to some guy named Ravinsky. Don't mess with these people. I learned the hard way." His voice trailed off and his lips tightened in anger. "I know all about Jennifer and Annette," Cruz said. Wes looked at Cruz and tried to gather his hate together, but all he could feel was disgust and pity. Cruz dropped his arm to his side and slumped his shoulders in hopelessness. "Annette and Jennifer are alive only because the Order fears this thing could get out of hand. If you stay quiet, they'll back off. What the Order does isn't always pretty, but they rule this county. Nothing of any significance happens without their approval. You could join us, you know. Then everyone would be safe." "I don't believe you," Wes shouted. "Do you think I'm crazy?" He pounded his fist on his desk, wishing it were Arnold Hancock's face. "What you're involved in, Warren, is evil. You're insane to think I'd go along with this. Insane!" "The way of the Raven isn't evil," Cruz said in a guttural whisper. "It's the way to power, to control, to all the things we truly seek in life. The Raven rules with strength. There's so much I could explain to you, Wes. You'd understand if you knew the rest." A cloud of hot fury settled over Wes. What perverted madness allowed Warren Cruz to feel justified in his evil? "It's 2 hours to showtime," Cruz said, looking at his watch. "I want to know by then if you're going to join us. It's the safest thing you can do for everyone. We're reasonable people, Wes." "Reasonable?" Wes snorted. "You kidnap a child, torment her with despicable ceremonies, and brainwash her. You call that reasonable?" "It was for her own good, Wes. She's a chosen one, a queen. She had to be prepared. She had to serve the Dark Raven." Cruz grabbed his coat from the back of the chair, flipped it over his shoulder, and stepped toward the door. "I know what you're going through," he said, glancing back at Wes. "I had to make the same choice. The Order of the Dark Raven is the true way. You'll see. You don't understand it now, but you will." Standing in the dead silence of his office, Wes knew his days of running were over. He breathed deeply and started cleaning out the drawers of his desk, putting things in his briefcase. While doing so, he picked up the phone. "Manley," he said, "I need you to be here at the WTTK studios, 12 o'clock sharp." "Why, Wes? What's up?" "I can't tell you. Just be here. If the receptionist tries to stop you, ignore her. Walk on past her. If my on-the-air light is glowing, ignore it. Come on into the studio." "Wes, what are you up to? Nothing crazy, I hope." "I'm saner than I've ever been in my life." After Wes hung up the phone, he thumbed through his address book for Hattie McKenzie's number and called her. Several minutes later, Michelle was on the line. "I don't have much time to talk. Do what I say and don't ask questions. You and Jennifer get on the first bus back to Clarion. One leaves around 11 o'clock. I checked in case I ever had to get Annette here in a hurry." One more call to make. Hannah Carmichael. Wes told her, "Bring Annette with you to the radio station at 12 o'clock. Don't ask why, just be here." Stunned, Hannah blurted, "But you wanted to keep Annette in hiding. Someone at the station might recognize her." "Hannah, I know what I'm doing. Trust me, please." It was all coming together. Wes picked up his briefcase and the laundry bag of dirty shirts with the hitchhiking alarm clock inside and set them by the door. He also took a cassette labeled Jennifer's Call out of his desk and put it into his briefcase. If his plan backfired, there would be no looking back, and no matter which way it went, a few dirty shirts might be all he had left. "2 minutes to showtime, Warren Cruz stepped into Studio A. "Wes, we were supposed to talk. I need your answer." "I've decided to join forces with you," Wes said. Cruz grinned widely. "I knew you'd see it our way. You've made the right choice. Annette and Jennifer will be fine now. A whole new life is beginning, a life you never dreamed possible. We'll talk more right after the show." 30 seconds to airtime, Chuck Bailey said. 15 seconds after the opening Talk About Town jingle, Wes Bryant faced his moment of truth. "Good afternoon, Columbus County. I'm Wes Bryant. This is Talk About Town. Today's show is unusual. I have several guests, including Warren Cruz, owner and general manager of WTTK, and Sheriff Arnold Hancock. We'll also have several surprise guests." Wes cut to commercial. Cruz burst through the door. "What's going on here? Why do you want me in the studio? I thought you were one of us now." "I'm a man of my word," Wes responded. "That's why I want you in here. Sit down in front of the mic, Warren." Wes started things rolling. "With me in the studio is Warren Cruz, my boss for the last 5 years. Warren Cruz, welcome to Talk About Town." Cruz loosened his tie and rubbed his index finger on the inside of his collar to give himself breathing room. He leaned toward the mic and responded, "Thanks, Wes. Happy to be here. Tell us about yourself, Warren. You know, all the biographical stuff. Let the folks get to know you better." Beads of perspiration formed on Cruz's brow. He wiped them with the back of his hand and leaned toward the mic. "Well, I'm 47 years old. I've been running this station for 12 years. I'm married, have 3 stepchildren. I'm proud of how WTTK serves our community." "Warren, take a good look at that bag on the shelf next to me. What's it look like?" Cruz shrugged his shoulders, gesturing toward the shelf. "It's a bag. Just a bag. My laundry's in there, Warren. Dirty laundry. You ever have any dirty laundry?" Cruz's eyes narrowed. "Sure, every week. My wife does it on Saturday." "Some dirty laundry doesn't wash easily, does it, Warren? In fact, it can explode right in your face." Cruz didn't respond. "There's something else in that bag, Warren. You can't see the dirty clothes, but you can hear what else is in there. Listen. What do you hear?" Cruz cocked his head, his left ear pointed toward the bag. "Sounds like you've got a clock in your laundry bag." "Something else is in that bag. The clock is attached to a motion-sensitive bomb." Chuck Bailey shot erect, a look of horror on his face. Cruz stiffened in his seat. "You're kidding," he declared. "Would I kid about something like that?" Wes asked. "Why do you think I want Sheriff Hancock over here? We're going to talk about dirty laundry. Mine, yours, Sheriff Hancock's, and some other people you know real well." Studio B had filled with WTTK staff members who peered through the pane to see what was happening. Wes leaned toward his microphone. "We won't take commercial breaks the rest of the show." He looked at Bailey. "As soon as Sheriff Hancock gets here, usher him into the studio. I want everyone out of the building except Cruz, Hancock, and Bailey. One more thing. Don't anybody try to cut off the electricity or take me off the air. I've got a monitor feed directly from the transmitter. I'd know in a split second if anyone tried anything funny. If they do, I'll throw this laundry bag on the floor and everything in here goes boom." Wes turned off the radio mic and switched on the office intercom. "Get out," he yelled into it, causing Cruz to jerk back violently, nearly tipping over his chair. Wes could see WTTK staff members running out of Studio B toward the front door. Then Wes reached over to the board and turned the studio mic on again. "Remember several weeks back the phone call from a young girl named Jennifer?" he asked his radio audience. "She talked about the Dark Raven, said she was being hurt. In case you don't remember that call, listen carefully." Wes hurriedly put the cassette in the deck and hit the play button for the cassette deck audio. Jennifer's taped voice broke the deadly silence in the air and declared, "I'm afraid of them. They hurt me. The Dark Raven." Without warning, Hancock burst into the studio, his gun drawn. 2 deputies stood behind him. Wes reached for the laundry bag and edged it toward the corner of the shelf. Cruz leaped to his feet with outstretched arms and backed away, restraining the sheriff from coming further. He screamed out, "Don't do anything, Arnold. He's got a bomb in that bag. The crazy fool is ready to blow us all up." Hancock slowly lowered his pistol and put it in his holster. Wes opened the microphone and said, "Our other guest has arrived, Sheriff Arnold Hancock. Hand your gun to the men with you, then tell them to get out of here." Hancock hesitated, then handed his gun to a deputy. "Go on, guys, get out of here. I'll take care of Bryant." Bailey rushed through the door with a molded plastic chair from Wes's office and shoved it behind Hancock. Reluctantly, the sheriff sat down. Wes placed a microphone in front of Hancock. "Scoot up closer to the microphone, Sheriff," Wes said. "Columbus County is waiting to hear from you." "I don't know what you're up to, Bryant, but you won't get away with this. My men, along with some state troopers, are surrounding this entire building. They know what you're doing." Wes grinned broadly. "Perfect. Just what I want. Hello, everyone out there," he said. "In case you've missed anything, I've got a tape recorder running. Everything that's said this afternoon will be recorded for posterity and the courts." "You're crazy, Bryant," Hancock screamed. "Nobody's going to believe anything you tell them. Before this day is over, you'll be behind bars." Wes didn't lift his hand off the laundry bag. He scooted it as close to the edge of the shelf as he could without pushing it off. "We're waiting for some other people you both know," he added to Hancock and Cruz. Wes turned up a tape playing continuous music and switched off his mic so he could speak to Bailey on the intercom. "Inform the wire services and CNN about what's going on. Make sure UPI and AP know about it. Call the network television stations in Indianapolis. I want the whole country to hear what's going to happen. As a backup, start the auxiliary deck in Studio C." Without hesitation, Bailey set off to fulfill the requests. Wes threw back his shoulders and voiced his best imitation of a disc jockey's voice. "And now, for your listening enjoyment, the easy sounds of light rock. No talk, just good music." Wes kept his hand on the laundry bag. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The sound seemed to grow louder as emotions heightened and sensory responses became more acute. "You can't get by with this," Cruz said. "Oh, I don't know," Wes answered. "Look what you and Hancock have gotten by with for years. You've hidden your dirty laundry a long time. What makes you think I can't come out of this squeaky clean?" Wes added, enjoying the play on words. "Anyway, I'm not interested in talking to you until everyone else is here. By the way, would you like to know who's coming?" Hancock shrugged his shoulders. "It doesn't matter." "It might matter, Sheriff. Manly Harris is one of them." "So what? I've dealt with him before." Then there's Hannah Carmichael, Reverend Carmichael's widow. So, should that bother me?" Hancock shot back. "Perhaps you'd be more interested in knowing that 2 other ladies are going to join us, Annette and Jennifer Simpson. Jennifer's got quite a story to share, and the whole country's finally going to hear it." Wes realized that if Manley, Hannah, Annette, and Jennifer were to get into the studio, they'd have to pass by a police cordon. For all he knew, they might be out there now. Wes turned down the volume on the cassette channel, playing music, and spoke over the air. "This is a message to the police surrounding the building. Let the following people come into the building: Manley Harris, Hannah Carmichael, Michelle Milthorpe, and Annette and Jennifer Simpson. They should be out there by now. So if you don't let them come in, I'll blow up the place." Moments later, he heard footsteps coming down the hallway toward the studio. Everyone turned to see who it was. Harris, Hannah, and Annette cautiously stepped into Studio A, closing the door behind them. Manley Harris spoke first. "What are you doing, Wes? Man, I'm a lawyer. I've got to advise you, you're in dangerous territory. I hope you've got a good reason for doing this." "I do, Manley. You'll see." "Wes," Annette said, "I trust you. Just tell me how I can help." Hannah Carmichael stood silently. Her large, dark eyes darted about the room. "Don't worry, Hannah," Wes said. "James's death will be avenged." Wes turned to Bailey. "Go outside and let me know who's here from the media." He paused, then spoke to Annette. "Sit down at the end of the table. As soon as Bailey gets back, I'm going to interview you. You don't have to say anything you don't want to, but now is the time to tell as much of your story as you can handle." Bailey opened the door to Studio A. "You're not going to believe what's going on out there. It's a 3-ring circus," he said. "I've never seen anything like it. CNN has moved in a satellite uplink dish, so have 2 network stations from Indianapolis. This is a major media event." Wes turned to Annette. "I'm going to shut off the music now. Are you ready to talk?" Annette nodded as Wes slowly faded the volume on the cassette deck. He activated his microphone and said, "A woman named Annette Simpson is in the studio with me. She's 34 years old and is the mother of 9-year-old Jennifer Simpson. She's got a story you'll find hard to believe, but it's true." Wes smiled and winked at Annette. "Mrs. Simpson, start at the beginning. The whole country is listening." Annette leaned toward the microphone and began. "It all started when Wes Bryant visited me in the hospital." Annette went on to tell the story of her escape, her reunion with Jennifer, and the truth she discovered about the Order of the Dark Raven. "If you can handle it, tell them about the ceremony where your daughter was married to your husband." Annette carefully constructed each detail with amazing accuracy and calmness. She spoke of the terror her daughter had experienced, of bloodletting ceremonies and perverted rituals. Fiction was one thing. This was fact. Wes carefully studied Cruz and Hancock. Even though they were obviously nervous to hear their evil behavior exposed, they displayed no regret. The more of Annette's story they heard, the more detached they became. As Annette approached the end of her story, Wes motioned for Bailey to come near him. Hesitantly, Bailey got out of his chair and leaned over the studio console as Wes whispered in his ear. Bailey left the studio immediately. A few minutes later, there was noise in the hallway. Through the window to Studio C, Bailey could be seen pushing 2 large speakers from the hallway into the room. Bailey returned to Studio A as Michelle and Jennifer walked in. "Mr. Wes!" Jennifer cried out, running to Wes. Wes started to lift his hand from the laundry bag to embrace her. Then he reached out with only his left arm to hug her tightly. "I've missed you so much," Jennifer said. Then out of the corner of her eye she saw her mother. "Mommy!" she shouted. "You're here too!" Jennifer turned to run around the corner of Wes's studio console, then stopped. Her body froze instantly as she looked directly at Cruz and Hancock. Wes switched off Annette's microphone, turned on his own, and said to the listening audience, "Jennifer, Annette Simpson's daughter has just walked into the studio. You just heard her. Right now, Jennifer's looking at Warren Cruz and Arnold Hancock. Jennifer, Come here for a moment. I want you to say something about those men." Wes reached out his hand to Jennifer, and she haltingly stepped toward him, never taking her eyes off Cruz and Hancock as if they were deadly snakes poised to strike. "I want to ask you some questions. Talk right into this thing. It's called a microphone. People who listen to me on the radio can hear you. Tell them who these men are." Jennifer lowered her head and snuggled more tightly into the crook of Wes's arm. And she threw her arms around his neck, looking away from the microphone. "They're the nasty people," she said. They hurt me bad. It was cold, dark. I was afraid. Nobody would help me. I wanted them to stop." "How did they hurt you?" Wes asked. "Bad. I don't want to talk about it." "Please try. It's important for everyone to know." "That man," she said, pointing at Warren Cruz, "he killed a baby rabbit." "How?" "In his hands. He squeezed it tight till there was blood everywhere. Then he put his bloody hands all over me," Jennifer said as she buried her face in Wes's shoulder. Annette whimpered slightly, and Wes could feel his shoulder growing moist from Jennifer's tears. "And the other man," he said, "that big guy sitting over there with a badge on?" "He hurt me too. Can you tell us how?" "He said something about making me belong to the Dark Raven. If it hurt, it would make me belong. But I don't belong to them. I belong to you and Mommy, don't I?" Jennifer burst into tears again and clutched Wes's neck. "Yes," Wes said. "You belong to us, not them." Wes looked up toward the window of Studio C. Bailey gave him a thumbs-up sign indicating his mission was complete. The speakers were ready for action, and the auxiliary deck was still recording. "Maybe you'd like to hear Annette's and Jennifer's story again, Hancock, in a way that would emphasize it to you. I want you to get out of that seat, open the door to the studio, step around the corner to Studio C, and walk in there. Don't try anything funny. If you try to run down the hallway and escape, you won't get very far. All I have to do is knock this laundry bag on the floor, and it's all over for everybody." Slowly, Hancock edged his way out the door around the corner and stepped into Studio C. Wes let go of Jennifer and reached to his board. He turned on a switch that activated the audio feed from Studio A to Studio C. "Can you hear me, Hancock?" Hancock nodded. "If you've got something to say, there's a microphone in there, and we can hear you in here. The whole country can hear. All I have to do is hit the right switch. Got that?" "Yeah, I got it," Hancock answered sullenly. "Now," Wes said to Hancock, "let me tell you something about those speakers Chuck Bailey just installed in your studio. Normally, a studio of that size would have tiny speakers, maybe 3 or 4 inches in diameter. Not huge 15-inch speakers like those. Know anything about sound electronics, Hancock?" "Why should I? I'm a sheriff, not an electrician." "Well, those speakers were designed for a football stadium. They're powerful, and I can control the volume from in here. For example, let me give you an audio tone. It's a high, shrill sound that we use to test the sound level of our equipment. Normally it sounds like this." Wes hit a button, sending the shrill shriek over the air. Then he turned it off. "If I want to, I can make that just a little louder," Wes said, grinning. "Like this." Wes gradually turned up the volume on the test tone to an ear-splitting level. The sound from the speakers rattled Studio C's window, and Hancock clasped his hands over his ears, screaming in pain. Then Wes turned the sound back down. "Turn that thing down! I can't stand it! You've got it too loud," Hancock said. "Good," Wes said. He nudged Jennifer slightly toward the microphone. "Is that the man who hurt you?" "Yes," Jennifer yelled as she pointed toward the window. "He's one of the nasty people. He's a friend of the Raven." Hancock clasped his hands to his ears again and shook his head violently. He pounded on the walls in pain. "I think maybe you heard that, Hancock, right?" "What are you trying to do, Bryant?" Hancock pleaded. "I can't take this. I'll get you, Bryant." "Jennifer, did you ever beg that man to stop hurting you? Did you ever cry out in pain?" "Yes," Jennifer said, "all the time. I begged him not to put blood on me. I begged him to let me go. He wouldn't. He just laughed and did it more. I hate him. I hate him. As Jennifer spoke, Wes turned up the volume to the speakers, sending Hancock berserk. He pounded the palm of his hands against the side of his head. Wes turned the volume up as loud as possible, shattering both Hancock's eardrums and the plate glass window separating Studio A from Studio C. The sound of glass splintering and crashing to the floor mingled with the sheriff's howl of agony. "Yes, I did it," Hancock screamed. "I'm the one. It's all true. Just turn those speakers down." He put his hands to the sides of his cheeks and then held his crimson palms in front of his face. "Blood on my hands. There's always been blood on my hands. Someone's blood. Anyone's blood. But I did it for the Raven. I had no choice. The Raven wanted it that way." "Because that's the way of justice," a strange voice said. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. A tall, blond-haired man stood motionless in the doorway. "It's Daddy!" Jennifer exclaimed. Silence saturated the atmosphere like a thick fog. Sheriff Hancock could be heard from on the floor where he had collapsed in pain, muttering, "Blood on my hands! Blood on my hands!" "Gregory!" Annette gasped and went limp. "You're alive!" She reached protectively toward Jennifer, and the two of them edged closer to Wes's side. Gradually, Annette changed her composure and looked defiantly at the man to whom she had once pledged her trust and eternal devotion. "My only peace of mind was thinking you burned in that accident straight back into the hell you came from." "Did you really think you could stand between me and my daughter?" Gregory challenged Annette as he walked toward her. Wes reached out to put his free arm around Annette, his other hand still firmly gripping the ticking laundry bag. "Jennifer is mine," Gregory insisted. "She was planned by the Order, a symbol of the Dark Raven's power, bred by your innocent soul. Do you think I've meant you by accident? My only obstacle was getting rid of you when the time was right. The car accident was planned in detail for weeks, and it was just a matter of time for the weather to help. You were meant to die, Annette." "No," Annette screamed. "God was there with me, Gregory. I am Jennifer's hope for the future, not you." "Get out of my way. Give me my daughter." Annette stood firmly, her grasp around Jennifer growing tighter. "Jennifer?" Gregory whispered to his scared daughter. "Come with me, my queen. You belong to me. We must go now." His voice was etched with determination as he extended his hand to the sobbing child. Jennifer clung to Wes, Annette's arms securely encircling her soft young shoulders. Tears streamed down Jennifer's cheeks. "No, Daddy," she said. "I belong with Mr. Wes and Mommy. Go away." And she buried her head in her mother's chest. Wes took the laundry bag in his hand and boldly stepped toward Gregory. The broken glass from the studio window cracked under his feet. "You've lost, Simpson," Wes shouted. "The Order is as worthless as the mindless souls who believed your lies." To Gregory Simpson it was plain. If justice were to reign supreme, he, the Dark Raven, would have to enforce it, and the moment was now. "You should already be dead. I'm only finishing what the Order couldn't do," Gregory yelled, sweat beading on his brow. Annette shrieked and pulled away. "Gregory, look at what you're doing. Look at the evil inside you. Stop. Think of Jennifer." "I am thinking about Jennifer. She's all I ever think about." Wes saw the gleam of a cold steel knife blade tucked neatly into Gregory's belt. He knew there would be 3 triangles on the handle. It was the same knife he had seen gleaming in the moonlight, the knife used to slit the goat's throat at the mounds of the elders. Wes dropped his laundry bag and lunged toward Gregory Simpson with a tackle more vicious than any in his football days. Gregory reached for the concealed knife, and in his haste reached past the handle, firmly gripping the blade in his bare hands. The pain of the blade slicing his flesh enraged him. Gregory ignored the blood running down his wrist, creating a crimson pattern on the cuff of his shirt. Wes grabbed Gregory's bloody, wounded hand and fought for control of the knife. Strength he hadn't felt in years surged through Wes as he shoved Gregory aside with a swift kick. Wes tottered to his feet and leaned against the console. Gregory also staggered to his feet, the knife still in his hand, and charged Wes again. Wes returned the assault with a brutal block. Everyone in the studio winced. Gregory's eyes, once filled with hot rage, now watered in response to the impact. His muscles jerked, and he took a deep, painful breath, grasping his stomach. Ignoring his own pain, Wes lunged back at Gregory. As the two collided, Wes felt his shoulder thrust against something solid. A sharp, unrelenting pain shot down his arm, competing with the familiar agony of his injured knee giving way. Wes fell to the floor, sidelined again. White stars flashed before Wes as he clutched his knee and pulled it to his chest. Wes looked down and saw blood dripping from his fingers. Red droplets splattered onto the floor, changing the shattered glass jewels beneath his feet from sparkling diamonds to deep red rubies. His shoulder had rammed into Gregory's knife, slicing deeply into his own flesh. Seeing the flashes of pain on Wes's face, Annette rushed to his side. Reeling from Wes's attack, Gregory stumbled backward toward the pitiful sheriff. His hand withdrew from where Wes's shoulder had delivered the final blow. Blood poured from Gregory's fingers. The blade of the Order's dagger protruded from the Raven's chest. Wes's attack and the force of his shoulder against the knife handle had turned the deadly weapon against its owner. Hancock staggered to his feet. Fresh blood trickled down his face, collecting in a clotted mass. Pain sapped his once arrogant strength as Hancock reached through the shattered window frame and offered his trembling hand to catch Gregory, who was now dying by his own sword. In slow motion, Gregory agonizingly fell backward toward Hancock in the direction of the one remaining shard of glass protruding from the frame of Studio C. It ripped through his flesh as his full weight came to rest in the arms of the one man he had trusted, Sheriff Arnold Hancock. "No!" Hancock screamed, as Gregory's blood mixed with his own. "You are the Raven, the keeper of justice!" Hancock desperately clutched the dying body, trying to remove the knife with its polished triangles, looking as if they were grinning at him in a sneer from hell. Gregory's chest gushed warm puddles of blood to the studio floor, a few feet from where Hannah and Michelle stood in horror. His eyes fixed upon Jennifer, and his lips curled upward in a sadistic salute to Wes. The Raven was dead. Wes held Annette's hand tightly, his own pain only a faint whisper compared to the gore and death that surrounded him. "It's over," Wes declared. "It's finally over." The events of this book are based on actual accounts of ritual abuse perpetrated by satanic cults. As shocking as it seems, each abusive criminal act cited has occurred to one or more real persons. Names and other details have been altered to protect the identities of those involved. If you or someone you know has been a victim of occult crime or ritual abuse, there is help available through qualified, experienced therapists and support groups. For further information, contact Compassion Connection, Box 36C, Denver, Colorado, 80236, or call area code 303-985-HOPE.
That concludes Dead Air by Bob Larson. If you would like additional information on any of the topics we have covered, the complete unabridged book is available in local bookstores everywhere. This has been a presentation of the Nelson Audio Library.